Emotional abuse is one of the most underused terms and overused terms that I think people are using in conversation right now, today, as we sit here. And so I want to approach our topic here with great sensitivity. We're not trying to, once again, go into your situation and prescribe exactly what you're supposed to do. We're not going to tell you what to think. We're going to give you a lot to think about on today's episode as we jump into two tactics that are sometimes used to emotionally abuse people, and that is love bombing and gaslighting. So, Jim, I'm going to turn to you first about the love bombing thing. I'd love for you to give us some kind of orientation, exactly what it is, and then I want to talk about how I have experienced that before.
I like that you said not so much the definition of, but the orientation too, because it has many nuances, I think love bombing does. So I say often they're coming on thick and fast. I mean, they're coming on, and there are two different types or entrances I've seen love bombing come in. Early in a relationship, and it could come from their anxious attachment style, or
like dating.
Yeah, it's like, and often people say like, whoa, boy, or whoa, you're wanting to call me all the time. We've just started dating. Obviously, in the sexual arena, it could be like, well, let's go sexual early in dating, right? But they will come on quick with all kinds of stuff and whatever love language stuff, or flowers, or we got to be together, we got to be on the phone every night or on FaceTime.
And gifts and kind of extravagant actions.
Which some people may say, wow, this is great. But after a while, it's like, that's just too much too soon. Also, there is that entrance where a person has not been love bombed. Maybe they had some dating there together, including in a marriage. And then a person begins to pull back appropriately. Let's say, for example, one example in healthy boundaries, like, now I'm not doing this dysfunctional dance anymore. I will begin to have boundaries, and they pull back. Or even more, someone saying, hey, if this is where you are, I'm going to separate, or we break up in a relationship, or in a marriage, literally to separate, like, this unhealthy dance that you're doing, I'm not going to continue to be that close or intimate with you. And then bam, I mean, it's like circus, parade, you got the jugglers. I mean, they're just pouring it on quick. That's all with a hook. I call that a boomerang in a relationship. I'm doing all that love bombing to boomerang back to get you back. And that's a high, dopamine high, norepinephrine high, that someone says, you moved away and I got you back.
Mm-hmm. So I have experienced this before in a relationship where there was a lot of rejection and a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. And I eventually made some decisions to take agency in that relationship and put up some healthy boundaries and honestly create some healthy separations to give myself time to get emotionally regulated. And it's like, okay, if you're going to reject me, then I am also going to create some safety around me so that the intensity of the ongoing rejection isn't something that I'm now allowing you to continue. And the minute that I started to pull back, and maybe even, it wasn't that I was rejecting them, I was drawing healthy boundaries, but they perceived it as me rejecting them.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, it went from famine of no attention to an absolute feast of so much attention. So what this did to me emotionally is I fell right into it. I was like, wow, okay. So now this is everything I've ever dreamed of. I've dreamed of them saying like, you're so beautiful and there's no one in the world that's as amazing as you. But I want you to listen to kind of the extreme nature of that. And it went from the famine of like no flowers, no gifts, no love letters, to all of a sudden things were showing up on my front doorstep constantly.
Amazon was very happy.
Amazon was happy. The florist was happy, And so the way that I took that then, because I fell right into the hook, like you said, the way I took it is, this is everything I've ever dreamed of. Well, yes, the rejection was horrible and the betrayal was really, really heartbreaking. But if it got me to the place where now we are going to have this relationship that I've always dreamed we could have.
Bombs away.
Then this is amazing, right?
Let's do it.
The problem is then once you settle into this is now a safe person, I can totally trust this person again. Look how much they love me. You know, I really have great hope for the relationship. Then all of a sudden, it cycles around to now there's going to be a famine again.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in that famine, now the rejection, the betrayal, the hurt, the heartbreak, it's almost even deeper. You know, like the Bible says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And it's like, I had no hope. I got great hope. Now my hopes are dashed, but it becomes a cycle. So then, okay, they pull back, they reject, whatever, but they still don't want to lose the relationship. So then as I pull back to create safety, draw healthy boundaries, then all of a sudden it goes from famine to feast again.
Right.
Well, and then it gets my hopes up again. And then I'm like, wow, okay, this time it's real. This time they really do. They love me and they've made some mistakes for sure, but all people make mistakes. You know?
Rationalizing.
But what I missed is no, this is a pattern.
Yeah.
And the thrill of getting you back is really the motivation. It has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't so that I could be well cared for and loved and treasured and all of that. It was because it was thrilling, the thrill of the chase.
Yeah.
Like it was thrilling to the pursuit,
Mm-hmm.
but then the capture lost all its thrill.
Yeah.
Notice the dance real quick. You said so eloquently, you are on this side, and this is everything I could ever want. Mercy and compassion, of course. We get to be human. This was everything I ever wanted. And in that cycle, running around a little bit like the victim triangle, maybe, but all of a sudden you've literally just said in a different way, and that other person then finally got everything they had always wanted. That's a powerful thing to go, bounce, she's bouncing away, and I can do all this love bombing, and I get her right back. So you, unhealthy as it may have been, were getting everything you wanted, but once you responded and loved the gifts and all that, and maybe said, okay, maybe this person's changing, they in that moment, including dopamine firing in their brain, got everything they want. Plan worked.
I think what's fascinating about that is the way that God designed us for love compared to the way love bombing, and I know we're going to talk about gaslighting in a second, how that works, where God designed us to experience this consistency of love over a period of time, you know?
So not the famine feast.
Yeah.
Famine,
So I'm gonna
feast.
That's a
I'm gonna
bipolar
do
type
something
thing.
that wasn't in my notes. I'm gonna spring it on you guys.
Okay,
And this
please
is
do.
like the thing that a theologian should never do, but probably shouldn't do.
You're outing yourself.
I know.
Are you
I know.
about to love bomb us?
No,
Yeah.
no, this is not love bombing. This is
Well,
not
we'd
love
like
bombing.
it if you would.
Right.
Anyhow.
No, this is not love bombing. This is just like let's take a step into speculation. Let's play a game of what if, right?
Okay.
And we're going to do a what if with God.
He's
right?
so off.
Are we like
I'm
the
so
contestants?
off.
So
Are you
off
the
of our
game-
notes
I'm
right
so off
now.
of our notes, but I think it's gonna be good, right?
Oh, go with
Because it just kind of dawned on me. It's like, okay, imagine if God showed his love to the people of Israel through the context of love bombing. Okay? So just think about it. Imagine if God doesn't give the people of Israel in the wilderness wandering daily manna, but instead he goes, hey, one day out of the week, I'm just going to throw up a whole bunch of manna, a whole bunch of food, but then y'all are going to have to starve for the rest of the week. You know? Well, he doesn't do that. Imagine if God was like, hey, you're wandering the wilderness and, there's a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of cloud by day. But imagine if God was just like, randomly, I'm just going to stop. I'm just not going to show up and now starve you, right? And then show back up with and I just think that it's a fascinating concept, the principle that we find throughout Scripture in terms of how God is actually trying to teach and train us to experience love is consistent, faithful, covenantal love. The Hebrew word for this is hesed. It's a hard word to translate. Most of your Bible translations, if you have like the ESV, it says steadfast love. I love that, but if I were to kind of translate it, I would use a very long chain of words. It is the hesed love of God is faithful, enduring, loving, steadfast, covenantal, never ceasing, that is the essence of what that hesed kind of love is. And what's fascinating with love bombing is not a hesed kind of love.
Yeah.
There's not faithful endurance. There's not covenant loyalty. There's not a never ceasing. in the goal of love bombing, it sounds like to me, is to overwhelm your senses to a point to compromise your ability to think rationally.
Very
And
well put.
if you are being overwhelmed and you can't think rationally, now your affections are actually in a place to be able to be manipulated.
And Jim, you've taught me, and I think this is really important, that love bombing nature of like, I don't want you, I do want you, lavish, 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 you know, I don't want you, I do want you, lavish, 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 all kinds of gifts, you know, statements,
Yeah.
big extremes. Then what's formed in intensity is in that kind of intensity of the famine, the feast, the famine, the feast, that intensity, it's a relationship built on intensity, not intimacy.
Right.
That's right.
And intimacy, that consistency, that like, I know I can count on you. Yes, there's going to be little ups and downs, but there's not going to be massive rejection and then big intense love and then massive rejection and then seemingly big intense love, right?
That sets up emotional whiplash.
It
turning
does.
Point. It's like, whoa, wow. And what I call also emotional vertigo, because most people know what vertigo is. Some have experienced that. But what I call a relational or emotional vertigo is I begin to spin like I don't even know what's going on here. So that backlash, whiplash of love bombing, and certainly as we move into gaslighting, it's very dysregulating to one system. While this other person over here, they're just having a party.
That's so true. And I do think here's something really important. I don't want you to all go, oh, wow, I sent my wife flowers 2 times last week. Is that love bombing? Thank you for sending your wife flowers 2 times last week. That's called romance, you know? And that is lovely. Some people might even call it foreplay inside of a marriage. Okay.
Sure.
But I'm just saying, like, to love your person well. And of course, like when you're dating, you know, there is going to be like extra love notes.
There'll be extravagance like
yeah.
that. There's a difference.
But
between,
there's a motivation factor
A
that
good one. Healthy motivation.
and there's rationale. Like you can look at it and evaluate and be like, oh, there's rationale for why there might be a little bit more extravagance in this expression of love. I think that the challenge here is when there is love bombing and the extravagance gets into a level of intensity and there's a catch that's associated. And trying to be wise.
Strings attached.
Yes, and you're trying to figure out what is the catch. And if you always like, you know, something that it's like, it happens with my kids, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but it's like all of a sudden my kids are like, Dad, I want to wash your car, and Dad, I want to, you know, I'm going to do all the dishes, and they're just going out, you're the best dad in the whole world, and I could not have asked for a better dad, you know, I'm just like, I feel so good, like, you know.
Boomerang, yes.
And then it's like, hey Dad, I want to go out with my friends and have a sleepover tonight, and by the way, can I have $100? Like, excuse, yes, like, because I feel like I want to keep the momentum of love that's coming my way, but also, dude, you just manipulated me big time with like trying to shower love on me. It's like, oh, there were strings attached to this.
So I think you bring up a good point, Joel, is the love bombing then can, I think where we need to take a step back from it is
just by the way, my kids do love me. That doesn't happen all the time. They're great.
Thank you for that disclaimer.
Sorry.
But I will say the where the line gets crossed is love bombing. The motive behind it is not to love and care well for a person that you're giving these gifts to and saying these big bombastic statements to and all of that. The motivation isn't about them. It's about getting what you want in the moment that you want it. And so I think that's really, really important. And never forget too that when you're kind of in an unhealthy relationship that all of a sudden starts to appear amazing, but then the pattern is we're going to go right back into these unhealthy things. This is what we call the dysfunctional dance. And I think it's really important to pay attention to this and acknowledge this is what I'm experiencing. So
I
now,
want a quick test real quick.
yes.
Quick. James chapter 4 and following. Why are there fightings and quarrels among you? It's like, oh, I want to hear the answer to this one. This is the Bible. Why are there fightings and quarrels among you? Is it not this? There's something you want, which is a demand. You better give me that. Think of a love bomber. There's something you want and you don't get it. You don't get what you want, so you what? Get mad, get angry. You know what it says? It says, so you murder. So that, and you have not because you ask not. All you ask to consume it upon your own lust, you adulterous people. But
And desires that rage within you.
yeah, just all this stuff that there's. So the love bombing always ends up being true bombing, because underneath that, when they don't get what they want, there is rage underneath that. Even you say they didn't rage, they just moved on, went to another relationship. Trust me, there will be rage in their heart going on. If we go too far into pornography, we have what we call eroticized rage, just mad at a spouse and I'll go do this, shutting them out, stonewalling. But that's that piece of love bombing. They're always after the $100 bill. They're always after getting what they want. So they will move on, and that bombing turns into another type of bombing.
Some
and
of
it's
you,
hate bombing.
yeah,
Oh, it will
absolutely.
definitely go on.
And I'll just jump this in here, because some people might just be wondering, like, this is what I'd be wondering, is like, well, how do I know what's genuine love and what's love bombing? Like, how do I make a
Sure.
distinction between them? So I just want to give you 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, which I think is going to be a perfect diagnostic tool to determine the difference between authentic, hesed kind of love versus love bombing. This is what Paul says to a church in Corinth that is honestly whack and wild. They're going through all kinds of stuff. And Paul is like, listen, everybody, pay attention. This is what love is. Love is patient. And I think that when he starts with patience, that is our instant rebuttal to love bombing. You know, there's a patient endurance. And he goes, and it's kind. It doesn't envy. It's not boastful, right? It's not arrogant. Like, pay attention to the words and the phrases in love bombing. What's the goal that the other person is trying to get? Are they trying to get boastfulness? Are they trying to like affirm their own arrogance, that they're something super special?
And are they trying to do nice things and then tell lots of people about it?
Yes.
Like, look how great
Boastful.
I love her.
That's
you know?
exactly right. Exactly. And it's like that boastfulness actually feeds into arrogance. He says it's not rude. Here's the pivotal one. It's not self-seeking, you know? It's not irritable. It doesn't keep records of wrong. Love finds no joy in unrighteousness, but it rejoices in truth. And then it bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things. And again, Paul starts the list with patience and he ends it with patience. It endures all things. And I just think that's a helpful maybe diagnostic to be able to evaluate.
That's so good. And like we hinted at before, if you're being love bombed and then the other person has expectations of what you are now going to do for them, and you don't do that, like, it didn't work. They didn't get you to do what they wanted you to do. The love bombing can turn into hate bombing.
Yes.
You know? And that's where I want to now now that we've acknowledged that, then step into the gaslighting, because that was also part of the cycle. During the famine times, gaslighting would often happen, because I would start questioning, why are we now back in this place? You know, and then I would have suspicions or I would have questions. But when I would ask, like, what's going on? Why have things now dramatically taken, you know, a bad turn, or we're back to this craziness that I thought we were healed from, I thought we'd moved on from? Then it was flipped back on me and I was told, I'm the crazy one. I'm the problem. Why are you now destroying our relationship? Because you keep having these suspicions. You keep having these questions. You know, what's your problem? And that's where we get into the gaslighting.
Yeah, and as a bridge across, when you're talking about love bombing, which leads to hate bombing, you've spoken eloquently, and you talk about gaslighting, you just shared, it ties right in, and that is lovey-dovey, lovey-dovey. This is agape love. This is great love of 1 Corinthians 13. This reality of gaslighting and love bombing, trust me, developmentally is very young in a person. I mean, it's one of my key themes. I have a sign in my office that says, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you are? So would you mind, you just eloquently read as a segue, 1 Corinthians 13. Think about unhealthy infantile or adolescent behavior in this. Would you happen to read verse 11, please?
Yeah, 1 Corinthians 13:11. It says, "When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put aside childish things."
So all that stuff, that idea that really I believe and teach that no therapist, no
That's so
pastor,
fascinating. It comes right.
right in the
Right before it.
chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've married people as a pastor, had
Mhm.
that, and I say, please, even though there's a context coming up behind that, please put verse 11. And so if you want to love well, and you are love bombing, or you are narcissistic, or whatever words we're going to continue to use, or certainly if you're gaslighting, that's very young in a person. Because little kids can say, lie, or say, you made me do. It's a classic one. See what you made me do? I mean, gaslighting goes real early in a person. So we're going to want to define what it is at one level?
Yeah.
Simply, like you said before, not so much a definition, but a description. Gaslighting is when I say you and I are in a relationship, I know the truth, you know the truth. We both know what the heck's happened here. We know that. But then I try to get you in what I call that emotional vertigo and try to make you think you crazy, or may even call you that, when we both know exactly what I've been doing. The goal is not just lying. You know, my log I use, I either lie, right at you and lie. O is omitting. You didn't ask that. That's very young. I ain't gonna tell you, son, did you eat the chocolate chip cookie? No, but I ate the Twinkie that was over here, or ate some candy. You didn't ask me that, Mom. Starts very young. Lie, omitting, or gaslighting. The gaslighting is we both know the truth, but my goal is to make you feel crazy, where you're kind of spinning. And sadly, you know what? It works.
So that you doubt your own, like, for me,
Reality.
it's like I was suspicious,
Yep.
but now every time I feel suspicious, I stop and ask me, instead of focusing on what are they doing that's making me suspicious, I would then stop and go, oh no, I'm suspicious. That probably means he's right. I'm crazy. I'm crazy. I'm the crazy one. I'm seeing things that I shouldn't see. I'm
Listen how powerful that is.
perceiving things that really aren't real. And then that also starts to wear you down to the point you don't want to invite other people in.
Totally.
And you kind of get locked into this feeling of craziness. And what I feared is if I brought someone else in to ask them, could my suspicions possibly be true, that I would be proven wrong, and in being proven wrong that my suspicions weren't true, then that would automatically mean I'm the crazy person.
And you know that happens. And sadly, honestly, that happens with people who are in the caregiving roles, whether they're pastors. It happens a lot with therapists. And sometimes because the therapist hasn't done their own work, and they go, well, is it biblical? Or maybe you just need to submit, or maybe not. Maybe it looks like this. It walks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. It means everything, but it might not be a duck. That's crazy, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
But sometimes even some therapists have done that.
Hi, friend. I have a confession to make. Sometimes I have more faith in my fears coming true than in God coming through for me. It's in hard seasons like these where I wake up in the morning and I already know that I just don't have anything to give that day. I truly want my heart to be aligned with the Lord, but prayer feels like another thing on my never-ending to-do list that requires energy I can't muster up. If you're in that place right now, I understand. That's why I created Trust is a Track Record, 5 scriptural truths to remember God's faithfulness. This is a free resource you can access today, and I've left the link in the description below this video. And I think gaslighting came from an old movie, right?
There's 2 different movies. Alfred Hitchcock has one, yeah.
Yeah, where I don't know, I can't remember. Is it that the
woman would set the gas lamps.
would go out and turn them on, turn all
Knew
the gas
they were
lanterns on, knew they were on.
And he would begin to, I use the dimmer switch in my office with clients, or if we did it here, it'd ruin the video shoot, but if you begin to dim the lights, so it's not always, sometimes that gaslighting more of a dimmer. Otherwise, you just go and go click and turn the light off. She knew, and people do that today. Honey, did I leave the porch light on? We always do every night. I know I did. She knew she turned it on. The guy came behind her and said, you didn't turn those lights on. So the gas lamps or the gas lights, that is the gaslighting. He knew exactly that he was manipulating her, and she began to go, maybe I didn't. And then the crazy game's on.
And what is he hoping to do in turning those lanterns off and her saying, I know I turned them on, but they're off. So did I turn them on?
Get her dysregulated, again, what I call emotional or relational vertigo, because if you start spinning, if I'm an addict, and Jim Kress is a recovering addict, so I can relate to it, if I see you spinning and maybe crazy, you're going to dial back, possibly saying, well, I saw this sign or I saw something else. You're going to begin to back away and not hold me accountable, because you're going to think you crazy up in there, and not that I'm crazy.
Okay.
Very functional.
So good. And it doesn't just happen with addicts. It can happen with
Oh,
anyone who is trying to kind of get you off the scent of whatever it is.
little kids do it. They don't know the term gaslighting, but they know the truth. You're looking right at them with chocolate all over their mouth. And little Jack, my grandson, we've got a video of it. And Lauren, my daughter-in-law, was like, who got into the cookies? And then they go down the line, my 3 grandsons, and gets to Jack, and he says, not me. I mean, it's just loaded with chocolate. So he knows completely well. So this often is why I say, had you read that verse, this is very young developmentally. Why it's important to grow up and put away childish things. Very true.
So what do we do about it? So if we're in a situation where we are either being love bombed or there's gaslighting happening, like, are there some strategies? Are there some practices? Like, what do we need to do if we're caught in a situation where this is happening?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to mental health. I've added spiritual health from Scott Peck. The author, mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. I am convinced that people tune off the last part of the verse, of that statement, and that is at all cost. So I want to get unilaterally, if you want a practical thing, I want you, and I know for a fact you did this with my buddy, with Joel, others, you did this with me, and that is you get your safe people, even if it's 1 or 2, and say, yeah, I trust you. This is what's going on. Do you think I'm crazy? Mirror back. What do you? So often that works with a safe person at times, like a therapist, to come in. And I said to you, one of the things you've said about my work with you, which has been just the joy of a lifetime. And I thought, wow, I mean, I've tried to really work hard for you. And that's what you say. The best thing Jim ever did to help me was to say, I believe you.
I believe you.
And now I'm being a little facetious, but I went, no, I've realized that is the core, because in gaslighting, emotional dysregulation, I'll question myself. So when someone says, look, my hub, I hear you, I understand you, and B, I believe you. That's the starting point. Who in your life do you have 2 or 3 good friends who you can go in? Therapy helps at times because it's confidential. And you say, I want to tell you what's going on, and let another wise person say, you did it with this guy especially. And I had the privilege of being there too, to go, no, this is what we hear. Right?
Can you gaslight yourself?
The research would say no, because notice, and here's why, because early in therapy and theology, I used that term and I realized it was wrong. We get to change, because gaslighting has to have the issue that I know the truth, and like you know the truth. So let's say I know the truth, but I'm here to overtly deceive myself. What you can do is be in denial. This is the second one that is very prominent, I think way more than denial, is rationalization. That's in the therapy field, that I will rationalize of, well, maybe I'm dysregulated, maybe he's right, but I don't have the intention in true gaslighting to lie to myself knowing I'm lying and deceive myself. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the reason it was so important when we would do our sessions and you would say, I believe you.
Yeah.
Is because sometimes the narrative around a situation that happened his narrative would be so vastly different than my narrative. And then I was like, wow, maybe I am making too big of a deal. Maybe it really wasn't as I remembered it. And so it was so helpful and so regulating for me to come in. And certainly you were listening to places where maybe I was taking the narrative in a wrong direction, because I'm not saying that my narrative was always right. But what I am saying is the consistency. You've said this before, Lysa. This is pretty consistent with that, and this is consistent with that. Like, Lysa, I believe you. Even if you don't get every detail right, I believe that what you are upset about, you should legitimately be upset about. And that just helped me so much. It helped me stop doubting that, that I was really the one at fault with everything.
To go back to the triangle, you say, oh, that's another program we know, but the victim triangle, at that moment, and you know this well, and so does Joel, I was not rescuing you. I was simply with you and holding up a mirror to say, and we know that James tells us God's word is the mirror, and I was holding it up and saying, here's what I see. And we built trust and safety versus me just being someone cutting your hair at the grocery store to say, okay, I'm gonna show you back, remind you. We know that God's word does that. Remember, zakar in Hebrew, remember. And it's like, I was saying, hey, this is what I've witnessed. We all need a fair witness to our stories, our lives. And so I had a chance to witness and go, I see it, I believe it.
And so I do love that you often remind people, don't go at this alone.
It's terrible.
Don't try to work out everything on your own. You don't need to tell everyone, but find a few safe people to gather around and give them permission. Tell me what you see. Like when I present this situation, help me see what I possibly can't see on my own.
Which can be our, well, I call it the personal board of directors. Hey, I don't care if you only have 2 seats at it. Try to get 4 seats, but these are trusted people who've earned the right to sit at your table. So develop a personal board of directors and say, you know me, we have some history. You've seen my ups, my downs, my highs, my lows. What do you hear me struggling with?
And what we're really after is truth. Like
Amen.
With love bombing, like it's so hard to discern what is true, what is not true. With gaslighting, it's so hard to discern what is true, what is not true.
Right.
But once we have people that we trust and love and that have our best interests in mind, both to say the hard things and the good things, but once we start establishing what the truth is a great starting point to then start to make progress toward healing or start to make progress toward help, start to make progress in a positive direction. And that's what we want. We just don't want to stay in this dysfunctional dance that eventually creates so much emotional exhaustion that it starts to lead to spiritual confusion about everything in our life.
Yeah, I think that there's a part of me that just wonders, it's like, okay, what do we do with this? There's a part of me that just wonders, did Moses experience a lot of gaslighting from the people of Israel? Like, I just think about like how many times Israelites come to Moses throughout the Exodus period, and they're just like, why'd you bring us out here to die? We had meat and fish and food and all kinds of great stuff, and Moses is like, wait a minute. Like, weren't y'all like heavy labor slaves? Like, I don't know about you, but like, and Moses might have been
extremely unfair conditions.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't know about y'all. Maybe I did because I grew up in the royal house, but like you guys, I don't think so, And so there's even the sense there. It's like, well, how does Moses respond to that? And I think he gives us in the book of Deuteronomy the most important thing that we ought to do. For sure in the context of the biblical narrative and the biblical story, but I think it's a principle that we can apply to this conversation of gaslighting and love bombing. But it's called the Shema of Deuteronomy 6, and in verse 4, Moses says, "Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength." So it's like the whole of the human body. These words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart, right? Wow. Yeah. So this is where they reside. They reside in your heart. Now we know the Hebrew word shuv, it has in mind both the wellspring of emotion and intellectual volition. So today we think of heart as this place of like affection and emotional reality. But for the Israelites, they're thinking about this both and, not either or. It's like the heart and mind, it resides there. And it says this, repeat these things to your children. When I am retelling a story, 2 things are happening. One is I'm remembering that story because I have to recall it. Yeah. Second, as I say it, I'm actually reenacting that story, So there's this like multiplicity to this. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. And I love this language. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your city gate. And I just wonder what would happen if we take the same principle that we should be doing in terms of the story of God and his love for us, and then we go back to these moments of gaslighting and love bombing and go, well, you know what? I need to have some people in my life that I can rehearse the truth with.
So good.
So good.
Right? Like I gotta just like, hey guys, I'm gonna tell the truth. I'm gonna say the truth as I understand it. Now you keep me accountable to this. Is this actually true? Is this an accurate retelling of that story? And if so, now we're held with the responsibility to do with the truth as it demands of our lives, right? And so if we don't make a change, then we're held accountable for that. But it starts with rehearsing the truth and communicating it and remembering it.
And I love that, Joel, because we've said before, and you've said it already on this series, is reality is crucial.
Yes.
And so mental health is a commitment to what is real, what is reality. And to bring this all together in some situations that I've faced in the past, love bombing and gaslighting, they're right there together.
Yeah.
They're operating together. And what would sometimes start happening is the love bombing would make me start to develop this narrative about how awesome this person is, how incredible they are. The gaslighting was secretly making me feel like I am not awesome, I am not incredible, like there's a whole lot that's wrong with me. So then the narrative sometimes when I would speak publicly about it is I would diminish myself, I would elevate this other person, and almost I was working against myself because I was convincing other people like how awesome they were and how I really couldn't be trusted, which was the exact opposite. So when I got into a situation where, Jim, you could see through some of the emotional dysfunction and emotional warfare that really I was in. And Joel, through the biblical lens of truth, you know, you would ask me wise questions, but also you guys had experiences with me that allowed me to remember I'm not terrible, awful, crazy, right? That actually in every other area of my life, like I'm pretty sane.
Yeah, that's a big one, because then it's like, wait a minute, now you're held with the responsibility of truth, because now we're talking about incongruency. One of those things has to be true, one of them can't be true. And if you've got the weight of witness on all of these people are saying this is true, and yet there's this one situation over here, it might be an important situation, it might be a very important relationship, but you have to deal honestly with the weight of the evidence that's there. And I think that's where you were at. You're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on.
That's right.
I got to reevaluate
What
this.
we were doing, by the way, okay, there was the venom that was put into you, right? Can I use that? Gaslighting and say love bombing, but let's stay with gaslighting. So I want you to see as a snake bite, which echoes Eden, although there wasn't a bite, but there was talking. So the venom went on. Joel and I and many others were the anti-venom. We were coming along and we weren't telling you, I believe, not much new things.
Right.
We were reminding you the Jewish thing from the Shema in Deuteronomy 6. We were simply reminding you, hey, let's hold up a mirror. Let me remind you, this is who you really are. We see your truth.
Yeah.
So that idea was not giving you all this new information. Sure, there was some, but we were reminding you, this is what's really true that we've seen and know about you.
Now, I already know Lisa, and I know in her mind she's thinking, oh no, people are going to think that I'm holier than thou and all this other stuff. And so let me just say very clearly, there were hard conversations.
Absolutely.
That were part of it. There was theology that I know that I challenged you with. There was therapeutic things that Jim, you know, but the point is, like, you dealt with it.
Yes.
You considered it. You evaluated it on its own terms. And so I just wanted to bring that because I know you're
Thank you,
thinking it.
Joel. I always do think that because I just want to be careful. I'm not a picture of perfection by any means. But also, I do want to just challenge you with this one last thought. When someone has proven to you that they don't have your best interest in mind over a long period of time, when someone has consistently lied to you, why then do you allow that person to be the loudest voice of truth in your life?
You might need to say that again. Say it again.
So when someone has proven over a long stretch of time, they don't have your best interest in mind, and they've lied to you over and over, why then would we put them in the position to be the loudest voice of truth in our life? Again, we're not telling you what to think. We're just giving you a lot to think about. And so if some of today's episode really resonates with you, please know we are praying for you. We hope this information helps you be empowered to then take it and do something with it. Again, not to start accusing other people in your life or labeling other people, but use it as a reality check, because mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. Thank you for joining us with this episode of Therapy and Theology. Thank you for watching this episode of Therapy and Theology. I never want you to miss out on any of these helpful conversations. So if you're not already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button.